Hello, I'm Dave Cobb, and welcome to Tek-Motivation's YouTube channel. Recently, we had some positive feedback that questioned, what is the difference between JUnit and Tao? Well, initially, Tao started life within a JUnit environment. Since then, Tao has grown significantly. Now, when I look back at the development of Tao, for me it feels that Tao and JUnit were like two brothers separated at birth and now went on to live two separate lives. Tao started around 2011. At the time, Credit Suisse funded an IT project to build a hedge tool for cash flow hedge accounting. The IT environment was a mixture of technologies, including Java and Oracle. At the time, the development team included Sam Bloom as a Java developer and me as a business analyst. The project team decided to use JUnit to support continuous integration. Initially, the number of JUnit tests grew rapidly, and as system development continued, it was soon clear that the effort to maintain all the JUnit tests, including updating assertions, including additional assertions, reprogramming the attachments to production code, and so on, was actually counterproductive. Moreover, as pressure for a system release grew, the project team questioned the quality and integrity of the JUnit tests. Often the team would report, "Oh, that JUnit test is failing because some of the new features means the old values don't apply." Consequently, a trend evolved in which it was easier for one developer to append the @ignore tag to the JUnit test than it was to understand another developer's mindset to fix the JUnit bug. Therefore, Sam Bloom and I created a new framework based heavily on the JUnit framework, but instead of asserting literal values for correctness, the framework used Excel sheets to contain the business deliverables, in other words, the test input data and the expected output. In effect, we were looking for an automated JUnit builder and a JUnit runner, which at the time was not freely available. After the project went live, Sam and I were so impressed at the impact the framework had on the development team that we decided to build an entirely new framework from the ground up as a private, independent initiative. We turned some of the good ideas we had from before into great ideas, whilst introducing many new cool features that we simply never had time to implement previously. So, I hope at the end of this presentation you will see that it is perhaps unfair to compare JUnit with Tao. Simply, Tao has moved on from automatic JUnit building and embraced a whole variety of testing functionality, far beyond unit testing with Java classes. If JUnit is the lone reporter from a 1920s circulation hacking out a story on a typewriter, then Tao is the modern high-tech newsroom connected globally that we now just take for granted. The technology has really moved on with Tao. It's like two brothers separated at birth, now living completely different lives. Tracing back along the roots, you will see that the key similarity with JUnit and Tao is theory. As a framework, they both want to promote best practices. Both frameworks believe in the principle of continuous integration, and both frameworks want software projects to develop new features and to generate a fresh build without introducing bugs. However, the key difference between JUnit and Tao is practice. In practice, JUnit has so many limitations. Two essential limitations are that JUnit forces the programmer to write the test and assume the values for input and output. The other limitation is that building and maintaining tests is a significant effort for the programmer. As a result, the programmer has two systems to develop: the production code and the test framework to validate the production code. Tao recognizes all these JUnit limitations and provides carefully considered practical solutions. Let us use an example. Suppose the IT project is something to do with the regulatory reporting requirements of a large financial institution. Suppose the business analyst has absolutely no feeling for IT development and generates a brain dump of abstract business terms saved as a Word document and referred to as a business requirements document. Very much like this. In the JUnit environment, the programmer would read this document many times over, maybe read it with another developer. invest a lot of time just to get to the point, and then arrange a meeting with the business to discuss and confirm whether the communication landed successfully. In the end, the programmer would filter about 90–95% of the document and concentrate on the one thing he did understand, that the system needs to add money. Immediately, the developer starts to write Java classes as production code, albeit lightweight, but enough to make a JUnit test compile. So the programmer creates the following test. With Tao, the same Word document becomes redundant, since the document does not integrate into the build process automatically. Instead, with Tao, the business analyst creates a test case that reflects all the functionality that the Word document attempted to communicate. The business analyst identifies the need for a netting process that, in very concrete and unambiguous terms, for a given set of raw transactions, will aggregate the amounts conditionally to generate a set of net settlements. The developer commits the test case to Tao and starts to build immediately a netting process so that, using the inputs supplied by business, will generate a set of outputs as specified by business. Since Tao provides automatically all the JUnit-like infrastructure automatically, like test class creation, value assertion, and so on, the programmer can now focus 100% on production code, letting Tao to manage the wrapping and execution of the test case as part of the build process. Immediately, we can start to see differences. Using JUnit, the communication between the business and IT is unstructured and fragmented. Regardless of meetings, workshops, and confirmation of assumptions, there will come a time when suddenly the developer will go to build without having any of that unstructured documentation integrated into the build process. Moreover, there is no way to validate that the communication has landed, even if the programmer insists, "I get it, it is easy, you want to add money." There are no guarantees that the programmer implements something else, believing that their assumptions are perfectly valid in context of business meaning. Using JUnit, the programmer must assume the input values, assume the expected output values, and ultimately write the test. This is a bad thing. This is a bad thing because programmers are notorious for missing the detail and making all sorts of false assumptions. In the example, the programmer unknowingly declares that no coins exist. Money is integer. There is no such thing as pennies or cents. Moreover, when will the programmer notice? When the system goes live? And who will fix the bug? Who will remember that the bug needs fixing in at least 3 parts of the class so far? Will it be the same programmer or a different programmer? Will the programmer replace int amount with double amount before writing a test or after writing a test? Or, perhaps most likely, writes no test at all because it is such a simple bug to fix. Only it is not so simple because of the way double works, and that, at time, 5 cents, or 0.05, actually could equal 0.0499999999999996, and so the problems either continue to production or become fossilized as known bugs and strange behavior. By comparison, Tao does not require the business to pass a rich text document. Tao does not require the programmer to understand the document. Tao does not require the business to confirm that the programmer understands and signs off the document. Instead, Tao requires the business analyst to supply example input and example output data. Tao requires a programmer to build an operation or method to process the input to generate the example output values that the business supplied. Therefore, using Tao, the programmer does not need to create tests. This is a good thing. This is a good thing because for the business, it is obvious that $828,831 minus $499,755.20 equals $329,075.80. And for the programmer, it is obvious during initial build that int amount does not support the test data supplied, nor would double unless the developer used rounding, in which case perhaps it is better to use float. Finally, one subtle point of difference is that the developer could commit the test case and Tao could run the test case automatically without the developer writing a single line of production code. Of course the test would fail. Tao would attempt to execute an unknown operation, but Tao would not crash, and this is fundamentally different to JUnit. To make the JUnit test run, the developer actually needs to create a production class with methods and attributes first, otherwise the JUnit test does not even compile. Therefore, however small the steps are, using JUnit still forces the developer to engage the design, build, and test loop, albeit an iteration of short incremental cycles. However, using Tao, the developer naturally falls within the design and test, build and test loop. Since Tao supports this loop naturally, Tao supports fully the test-driven development methodology. JUnit, on the other hand, however much it shortens the design, build, test loop, it can never restructure it completely, because for the JUnit test to compile, it must first have the production class in place. To compare the advantages and disadvantages, it is clear that with JUnit, the only advantage it has over Tao is that JUnit is free open source software. However, the cost to one side, installing and configuring Tao is as straightforward as JUnit. If the IT project is using a version control, a dependency manager, and a continuous integration server, then we designed Tao for exactly this environment, and Tao fits seamlessly within the environment. The advantages, however, that Tao has over JUnit are many. First, the business defines the test. The business defines the input values and the expected output values. Therefore, the programmer does not need to make assumptions or interpret anything else regarding the operation's behavior. Because the business supplies the test case, and because Tao handles the test infrastructure, the programmer does not do the test. The programmer has only the production code to write, and if the code generates a result that matches the expected output, then the code is complete. And, for that matter, so is the unit testing activities. In theory, Tao expects the business analyst to cover all combinations of input and output. In practice, this is only 80% complete initially. However, the development environment using Tao with automated test integration and test execution means it is trivial for the business to check out a test case, include some updates, add a few more test case instances, and check the test case back into Tao. The trigger is that often a programmer realizes exceptions within the implementation of the test case. This is valuable feedback to the business, and often the result is the business realizes some limitations that they did not see initially. Consequently, the business provides solutions for the exceptions and describes the solutions as additional instances of test data assertions. With JUnit, this bilateral engagement does not happen, and therefore the developing of the JUnit test means the programmer excludes the business from the development. Consequently, any limitations within each other's test data do not have the opportunity to become exposed. Tao makes no distinction between a unit test, integration test, and a regression test. Further, although we wrote Tao in Java, it can interface to any IT development environment and support any type of testing activity. With JUnit, the tests are only part of the build process, and the build must be in Java and remain in the development environment only. With Tao, The same tests can run in an integration test environment, user acceptance test environment, a pre-production environment, or even, with read-only access, on a production environment. For example, if a test case validates that all active accounts have trading positions, then often such test cases work in development but fail in production. Using Tao allows the IT project to reference production as a read-only consumer of data, identify immediately the exceptions that generated the errors. Using JUnit would be impossible unless the IT project deployed JUnit tests to production, which of course would violate best practice principles anyway. The most subtle yet fundamental advantage is that Tao supports fully test-driven development. Fundamentally, the production code does not need to exist for the test to execute. Let me repeat that. For a test to execute, Tao does not require production code. This means, in practice, testing can start before programming. This is simply not possible with JUnit. The programmer, however light he makes the production code, he must start somewhere, and therefore must create the production class in order for the JUnit tests to compile. The benefits of test-driven development go far beyond this simple comparison between JUnit and Tao, and so we will cover those differences in later presentations. The disadvantages are a reflection of the advantages. In other words, Tao, unlike JUnit, is not free open source software. Similarly, JUnit forces the programmer to define the tests, to do the testing, and to manually integrate the tests. Although the programmer may have commitment using JUnit in the early stages, in practice, as project increases pressure for deliverables, the cost of continually maintaining JUnit tests become hard to justify. Consequently, the IT project teams start to compromise and negotiate the JUnit tests individually. Without judgment, this is a totally understandable circumstance, so much so that from our previous experience we created Tao so that in theory, as well as practice, the IT project are able to continue with best practices in software development, to develop new features and to generate a fresh build continuously without introducing bugs. This concludes our presentation of JUnit and Tao. I'm Dave Cobb, and thank you for watching, and please check out more videos and demonstrations on Tao, Tek-Motivation solution for test-driven development. Goodbye.